Tom, you wrote in the New York Times you had never seen anything like what has happened in the past 2 months in American politics. Women are registering to vote in numbers I've never seen before. This is a moment to throw old political assumptions out the window and to consider that Democrats could buck historic trends this cycle. Tell me more.
Well, Alicia, as you mentioned, we've spent the last 18 months assuming that this would be a red wave election. And for good reason. That's the precedent. That's how midterm elections go. The party that's not in the White House generally wins the popular vote for the House by over 5 points. And so that was the assumption until you shared those numbers from Kansas. You've been talking about this. A lot of people, myself included, were surprised. As someone who's been analyzing political data for almost 3 decades, was frankly surprised that the pro-choice position would not only succeed in a state like Kansas, but succeed by such a wide margin, almost 20 points. So we set out to understand how that happened and to understand, is this changing the calculus of a red wave? And the answer, as you showed there, to find that 70% of the voters who registered in Kansas after Dobbs and before that early August election were women was just shocking.
Right. And I think in some ways this metric is much more interesting than polling because, as you know, it is increasingly difficult to reach voters through polling, which means a lot of the voters you get are the people who are really fired up, who are activated. So I think just looking at that voter registration number is different. I wonder how you are assessing that it really is abortion that is driving them and how you weight abortion as an issue relative to all the other things we hear from voters when they are polled, concerns about the economy, concerns about inflation. Is it that this issue then supersedes all of those other issues?
Generally, when you're doing this sort of analysis, it's impossible to ascribe a motive to actions like these, to voting, to candidate choice, to that sort of thing. Like you say, we have polling, but polling is a very imperfect indicator. In my years of analyzing election results, I've never seen something that comes close to this in terms of a before and an after. That Dobbs and the June 24th decision by the Supreme Court was so clearly an inflection point where you look at the voter registration data before and after, and it's so dramatically different where not just in Kansas, but in red states, purple states, blue states, you're seeing women register at a much higher rate. And your point about polling is incredibly important because in the end, every poll that we consume over the closing weeks of this election is based on the pollster's sense of who's going to vote in that election. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is all of this calls that into question because there isn't a precedent for this in terms of a 50-year human right precedent being overturned by the Supreme Court. We don't have an election to go back to and base our polls and our models off of. So it's a big question at this point.